So Rillaboom in Pokemon Sword and Shield is really good, except for he has one really big weakness, but other than that, well, he has one really big thing that holds him back, but other than that, he's pretty good, and you can kind of turn that weakness into an advantage. But 100 health with 90 defense and 70 special defense is really good because it makes him really tanky overall. 100 hit points is a lot of hit points plus 90 defense, so you're just naturally bulky, especially if you invest in your health. 60 special attack. He's not really a special attack. He's not a special attacker. It's really low, especially when you have a 125 attack, which is really good with 85 speed. He's not the fastest thing, but he's also not slow, so you can make 85 speed work, especially if you can get like a baton pass of speed into him, or a +1 at that point, and outspeed a lot. And his abilities are Overgrow and Grassy Surge. Overgrow is whatever, it's the starter ability, it's not great. Grassy Surge is probably the best hidden ability on a starter, maybe other than like Blaziken, but it's probably like the best one because Grassy Surge, having a grassy terrain instantly is really good, especially when you have access to moves like Grassy Glide. And his signature move is Drum Beating, which is a really good grass move. It's a really good move. 100% it lowers the target's speed by 1, and that's why I said his speed's, it's really like his speed, he isn't the fastest thing, but 85 speed's really good when you have access to Drum Beating or if you can raise his speed, because then you get to a point where after one Drum Beating, if they're not super fast Dragapult level speed and it's something a little slower like 110, you can outspeed even without it. I want to say without investment, don't quote me on that, but you can, especially things, if you put speed investment, once you get a Drum Beating, you can outspeed and just two-shot some things, so it's really good. And back to Rillaboom's really weakness, big weakness is being pure grass. It's not a great typing because you have a lot of weaknesses in flying, poison, bug, fire, and ice. Ice is common, fire is common, poison and flying are both common. Poison because of fairies, and flying with Dynamaxes because it raises your max air stream is really good. But you resist ground, water, grass, and electric. But like this is why I said this is Rillaboom's really only its only real weakness is it has a lot of weaknesses and they're common weaknesses. But when you're this tanky and you have access to things like a weakness policy, that's why I said you can kind of turn it into an advantage in a way if you play your cards right. And this is one way to run Rillaboom, which is kind of, it's hard to stop if they don't resist grass, because what you want to do is max health, max attack, and you want to come in and you want to Swords Dance. You want to come in if you can against something that doesn't have a super effective hit on you. Certain things, or if something they use to set up, or if it's a setup Pokemon, and something like a Poltegeist, for example, or Mimikyu. Not those two exactly, because they kind of disguise and Focus Sash normally would throw you under the bus. But actually, Poltegeist is a really good matchup for this, because you can just Grassy Glide it twice and KO it. And I like running Terrain Extender because it gives you 8 turns. But the plan is you want to come in against something, take a hit, and then Swords Dance, get a +2, and just Grassy Glide everything down. You get priority on grassy terrain, so you have a +1, and you have it for 8 turns because of the terrain extender with your ability. And Grassy Surge or Grassy Terrain also boosts grass type moves by an extra 50%. So Grassy Glide has priority, 70 base power, plus the 50% from Grassy Terrain, plus 125 attack. If you get a Swords Dance, it's even better. So you'll just come through and just shred things that don't resist grass. It sucks that Rillaboom doesn't learn Sucker Punch, because Sucker Punch also be really good to have in here. That's another priority move, but Hammer Arm and Earthquake for coverage. You can get rid of Hammer Arm for something like Darkest Lariat if you're worried about them setting up your if you're worried about them setting up defense. Darkest Lariat's really good just to guarantee they can't. Brick Break's also an option if you're worried about them setting up screens or anything like that. I wouldn't run Fake Out on this one just because it kind of eats away at a turn that you could be using for something else. Knockoff is also really good because Knockoff does a lot of damage. I think it has like 97 base power the first hit. So Knockoff's really good, but for the most part, you want to just Grassy Glide everything down and just KO them because it'll do a lot of damage and it's priority. But another way to run Rillaboom is to just go max health, max attack, and just be really tanky with a Grassy Seed. And what you want to do is just come in, take a hit. Again, since your speed is decent enough, you can come in Drum Beating as long as you're not against something that's super fast. And even if they're super fast, you can more so worry about doing a lot of damage and then finish them off with Grassy Glide under the grassy terrain and go from there. But what you want to do is Drum Beating, lower their speed, and then KO them with either another Drum Beating or Acrobatics and Earthquake, whichever one is better, and just KO them with that, especially because the Grassy Seed gets used, so Acrobatics has 110 base power. So you want to go from there. I like having Grassy Glide in this last spot. You can replace it with another coverage move, again like Darkest Lariat, Knockoff, Hammer Arm, for example. But I like having Grassy Glide just in case you hit them, they have a sash or something like that. Or if it's something really fast like Dragapult, and you hit it with like an Earthquake and it like barely lives and you need to KO or you just need, like, priority is just really good to have on Rillaboom. You can, I think you need the drum beating though, because just for that speed. You can also take away health. I would still say keep some health, like something like this, just so you're guaranteed a couple more outspeeds. But I kind of like the bulky one, just as you want to be as tanky as possible and take as many hits as possible. And also Grassy Glide is just good in case they switch in something else and they outspeed you, so you know you're gonna get KO'd, so you can just do some free damage. But Gigantamax Rillaboom is, the plan with this is, again, like I said, weakness policy is one way to make use of your biggest weakness. You pretty much will never get one shot. Even without health investment, you'll pretty much never get one shot with Rillaboom as a Dynamax or a Gigantamax. And what you want to do is come in and max Airstream immediately, just to raise your speed again, or Hammer Arm. You just want to KO them. Most likely you want to get the Acrobatics because the weakness policy gives you a +2 anyway. You want to come in on something, and pretty much Acrobatics, get your speed, get the weakness policy, and then if you can KO them with Hammer Arm, that'd be even better because you know they have a +3 attack. And again, just Earthquake's really good. Again, you can run a coverage move instead of, I think you need Acrobatics and Hammer Arm raise your attack. Earthquake you kind of need, like, Earthquake's just really good coverage. And for the stab move, I like Grassy Glide, and that's why it's a G-Max Rillaboom, because unlike any other G-Max moves, the starters in this region, I forgot what the region was called, when they're all Gigantamax, all their signature moves are 160 base power. So I like having a Grassy Glide just so when you undynamax, you want to have the grassy terrain and you have a lot of health, you have a lot of attack, you have a +2 or maybe even a +5 at that point, depending on how many Hammer Arms, or probably a +4. And you want to come in and you can have that priority in Grassy Glide to just KO everything. Again, I like having the priority. You can run something with more damage like Drum Beating. I would not run Wood Hammer though, because you'll take yourself out on recoil at that point. So between Grassy Glide and Drum Beating, just depending if you want the priority for less damage or you just want the you just want more damage in Drum Beating, and you go from there. You do have to be careful though using Hammer Arm after, like, if you're not Dynamax anymore, you have to be careful with Hammer Arm because it'll lower your speed, which is a problem. Also, when you're Dynamax, the G-Max Drum Solo will also get the boost from Grassy Terrain, so it'll do even more damage. And it also pretty much effectively takes out sashes because it does damage. Actually, this one does not. What does it do? I think this one ignores abilities, like Mold Breaker. Yeah, ignoring the effects of the target's ability. So it's really good against things like Mimikyu, for example. It ignores Disguise. It'll ignore Sturdy and things like that. So you gotta remember that, because that's a really good like counter to Mimikyu, is Gigantamax, the Gigantamax starters. But this is a doubles Rillaboom. You just want to be as tanky as possible. First turn, you want to come out and fake out and then have your ally set up a Tailwind or something and just go from there. If you're running Tailwind, you don't necessarily need Grassy Glide. You can run something like you can run Drum Beating. Actually, I wonder if Drum Beating hits both opponents. I don't know if it does. Let's see. I don't think it does. Yeah, it doesn't. But you can run something, you can get rid of Grassy Glide for Drum Beating if you're setting up the Tailwind. If not, you can kind of just take out an opponent and double down. Or if you do a move like Rock Slide, for example, and then you finish them off with the Grassy Glide, or you Grassy Glide them and then you hit them with the Rock Slide and KO them, so you can kind of focus on an opponent with priority and take them out. Fake Out's really good for just making it a 1-on-1 that first turn, especially if your ally is setting up and you know they have a taunt. Knockoff's really good in doubles. This is more of a supportive, quote-unquote supportive Rillaboom, and then Acrobatics. Knockoff's really good just to take out some of their items, and Acrobatics just good damage with Grassy Glide as priority. Just go from there. And I like the Grassy Seed just for the defense to make you last a little longer. You can get rid of it for something like a berry, like a citrus berry. You have to be really careful with the Aguav on Rillaboom, or like the 1/4 berries on Rillaboom, just because they don't hit you with a super effective hit. They won't proc the berries, and if you already hit once and they hit you with a super effective hit, it'll probably KO you, especially if it's a more powerful one. So you have to be really careful between the Aguav and the 1/4 berries. But some of the other moves he learns, again, Dark Area, Drain Punch if you want to build a tankier, Drain Punch and Bulk Up if you want a tankier one, High Horsepower and doubles. He's really good with a Life Orb too, if you can get him set up in a way. You would have to give him speed though. That's the only thing with the life orb, is you would have to give him speed before he uses the life orb. But like if you Dynamax, for example, like if you wanted to on this one, if you didn't want the weakness policy, you can run life orb. But since you have so many weaknesses and you're not the fastest thing, I like weakness policy a little more. And you also, since you're bulky too, you don't want to lose health after an attack. So I like the weakness policy a little bit more, especially if you're Dynamaxing or G-Maxing. But if you're running Dynamax Rillaboom, you really don't need Grassy Glide. You can probably get away with... The problem, I would say Drum Beating, because you don't want Wood Hammer, because then that'll be your only move. You only use Stab, Grass move, and you'll KO yourself. So if you're running Dynamax, I would run Drum Beating, but if not, I like the Grassy Glide, since it does 160 anyway. Since it's guaranteed 160. But some of the other moves Rillaboom learns are, let's see, Wood Hammer. Endeavor, you can do some things with Endeavor if you want, especially in doubles. If you have a Follow Me Pokemon and you get him down to 1 health, you kind of Endeavor and screw around. He's too slow for Taunt. He also has Noble Roar, which lowers both opponents' attack stats, which it's pretty decent, but again, you're slower, so they'll attack most likely, unless they're slow or you just run max speed and you try to do that. You'll very rarely get the Noble Roar off first, so I wouldn't really focus too much on that. But some of the other moves, Solar Blade, if you're running him in Sunlight, Solar Blade is really good. Nature Power is useless on him, by the way, just because they're all special moves, so he learns it somewhere. It's kind of useless. Again, Solar Blade's good if you're running him on a Sun team, for example. Facade's good as a physical attacker, just in case you get burned always. Bullet Seed, you can play that risk with Bullet Seed. If it hits 4 times, it'll do 100 base power. So you kind of have to play that risk. If it hits 4 times, it's the most you can do on a grass move with no drawback. But if it hits twice, it's kind of useless at that point. Bulldoze and doubles too is really good because it lowers everyone's speed. But you have to have an ally with that. The problem with Bulldoze and Earthquake for Rillaboom, for example, is to get the use of grassy terrain, you have to be on the ground. So it kind of defeats the purpose if you want to use Earthquake or Bulldoze, because your ally is going to get hit with it. Unless your ally is like grass, unless your ally just really resists Earthquake, you have to be careful, because otherwise they just won't get any boost from it. They won't get the health or anything back from grassy terrain. So it's not the greatest. Body Slam is really good, especially if you get the paralysis. Stomping Tantrum, there's no real reason to use. You can use high horsepower in doubles too if you want that ground coverage. Be careful with Superpower because it lowers your attack and defense. Like I said, very bad specially, so ignore all of these moves. Screech is 85 accuracy. Swords Dance is really good. It's sub Endure. You can do some things with Endure with Rillaboom, but unless you're running, unless you give Rillaboom, you baton pass him speed and then you Endure into a weakness policy, there's not really much use for him because weakness policy raises both your stats, so that's better. Swords Dance raises your attack by 2, which is better, other than a +1 from a berry. So it's not really worth it to have that Endure. You don't have very much priority, and the Endure takes a turn away from grassy terrain, which is your only priority. So it kind of hurts a little bit. You're too slow for workup. He also learns Growth, actually, somewhere. There it is, Growth. Growth also raises both your attack stats by 2 in the Sun, but 1 normally. So if you're, again, in a Sun team, you can make that work, especially in doubles. Or if you just set really, like, Growth is not really worth it over Swords Dance because you're not a special attacker. So I would still run Swords Dance. And Growth is only good in the Sun, so gonna have to be wary of that. Again, Fake Out's really good. You can also run Fake Out in singles, but I like Fake Out in doubles, really only in doubles, because it takes away a turn from grassy terrain where you're not doing anything. Where it's like, oh, I faked out, and then you lost turn to grassy terrain. So it's not the greatest. Also has access to Leech Life. It's not... Rillaboom's tanky, but its typing kind of holds it back, because you can't really survive more than a hit or 2. Like, at most, Rillaboom's gonna survive 2 hits unless if they have no super effective hits, Rillaboom can survive like 2 hits, maybe 3 with Grassy Seed. But... yeah, Grassy Seed, but it's not the tankiest thing to make use of Leech Life. Nature Power is worthless because it's all special. Worry Seed's also an option if you want to get rid of an ability in doubles, for example, and just take away someone's ability and give it Worry Seed. And being a starter, it has access to Frenzy Plant and Grassy Pledge, which you're physical, so both of those are useless on Rillaboom. But that's how to use Rillaboom in Pokemon Sword and Shield.